Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another version of 60-minute stories. I'm your host, Ibrahim Bashir. I write the Run the Business newsletter on Substack, and I do these weekly discussions with interesting folks in the product technology and business space. And then today I have Daniel Elizalde with us. Daniel, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, thank you, Ibrahim. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Daniel Elizalde. I'm a product leader from 25 years of experience working on B2B solutions. My background is more on industrial type of solutions. I worked in manufacturing, telecommunications, energy, automotive, aerospace, and some of my relevant experience. I've been head of products at a energy storage company in Silicon Valley. And I've also been vice president, head of IoT for Ericsson. And I taught for many years IoT product management at Stanford Continuing Studies. I've trained thousands of professionals. For the past few years, I've focused as an independent coach and advisor for companies doing B2B and IoT solutions, mostly in the climate space. I wrote a book, the B2B Innovators Map, which is a bestseller on the area of how to build new products in the B2B space. And I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that comprehensive intro. And Daniel, your book on B2B product innovation is really what we're going to focus on today. And I think maybe just to get the ball rolling, in your book, in the first chapter, you actually make a point about why product innovation fails in the B2B space. You want to tell us a little bit about your thesis on what are the root causes of that?
Yes. So the root cause really is that most companies build products that nobody wants. So there's a lot of emphasis on just either focusing on a specific technology or on a hunch that some executive had, and then or on a request from one particular customer that will magically turn into a product for the whole industry, and that never happens. So surprisingly enough, technology has gotten so much more advanced and easy to use that you can build anything. So it's not a building issue, it's a building something that people want and then having the ability to monetize it. And that's where my book comes in, is to how do you take a step back and try to figure that out from the beginning.
Got it. I mean, it's interesting you mentioned, sort of a hunch from somebody. There are a lot of products that are based on hunches, and, a hunch is just a simple term for somebody who tends to have intuition or domain experience, truly understands a problem. So I guess what would be your thought around, hey, a founding CEO has a take on the market and it is grounded in something, but it is very much like build my idea and my vision.
Yeah, and that happens all the time. Of course, that's why they're the CEO or the founder. And the way I approach it is not negate that, is let's investigate if that hunch is actually going to turn itself into a profitable product, because that's ultimately what you want. So you don't want to spend a lot of time and a lot of money burning cash. Like if you're a startup, you can run out of money chasing something that you don't really know if it's going to be successful. So you always have to start from somewhere, but the key is, can you investigate whether that hunch can turn into a successful product versus let's just build it and we'll see later. And I think our industry is polluted with a lot of like one-off success of this hero founder that had an idea and turned into a billion-dollar company. Those are far in between. That's mythology, right? In my experience, the majority of products fail early on, and so let's try to improve those odds.
Yeah. And is there anything you want to share about sort of innovation in the B2B space relative to the B2C space?
Yeah, I think it's quite different. And all my experience has been in B2B. All my career has been in B2B. And I've noticed in the last 10 years or so, there's been an explosion of information about product management, but 90% of that information is for B2C. And so if you are in B2B, especially in my areas of heavy industry, like most of the advice out there is pretty much irrelevant, because the basic thing is that in B2C, you have the user is the buyer and they are solving a personal problem. In B2B, you're solving a business problem and you have a group of people that are going to decide to buy and a different people that are going to decide to use it. And then in the areas that I work around, you have regulation, you have threats of cybersecurity, you have long implementations, you have very high cost of capital, extremely high switching costs. So it's a completely different game. And so understanding all those areas, and as a innovator and product leader, be able to chip away at the friction of the whole life cycle it's what's very important and what can help you get a successful product.
I am curious, and you are correct, so much of the literature and thought leadership is around consumer products. What is sort of a best practice or agreed upon principle in consumer products that just breaks badly when you apply it to B2B, that you see people doing again and again?
Yeah, one of the challenges that I see all the time is that in B2C, because you have the user be the buyer, and most of the products that we see out there are kind of horizontally and generic, right? They're productivity apps, or they are, convenience things. Your target audience is very broad. So I one of the jokes I like to say, like at one conference, somebody was speaking about how you actually do things, and they say, well, you just take your team, park them at a Starbucks, and show people passing by your app, and they will get feedback. But like in B2B, especially in the areas that I deal with, like if I am building, I don't know, predictive maintenance solutions for nuclear reactors, like the director of operations of a nuclear reactor is not going to be at a Starbucks, and just going to walk by, right? And so in B2B, it's very difficult to find the people that you need to talk to and get their time to talk to you so that you can actually get the discovery and the insights. In B2C, there's all these techniques about just send a survey or just do an A/B test with traffic, all that stuff. It just doesn't really work. Works later in the process, maybe, but the approach is quite different in B2B.
Got it. And in your book, you actually lay out sort of the concrete steps of the innovation journey. Do you want to walk us through those steps?
Of course. So when I started thinking about the book, I planned to do from idea to scale. But then, of course, that turned out to be too big, right? It's just too much for one book to begin with, and also for the people developing these solutions. Usually, there are different stages, and so as I dug more into my experience and talked to a lot of people, most B2B solutions, enterprise solutions that I researched, they never make it past 10 customers, and so I decided to focus my book on how do you get from idea to your first 10 customers. If we're able to improve those odds, then you start getting into the road to growth, and that's a different thing. It's somewhat a little bit easier, right? So in my book, I break the journey from idea to first 10 customers in 6 stages. And the stages are strategic alignment, market discovery, user discovery, solution planning, prototyping, and early adopter. And we can discuss those, or I can take the conversation however you think is more interesting.
Yeah, I guess, let's start with sort of the alignment piece. What are some sort of best practices and anti-patterns that you see there?
Yeah, when I started writing the book, I was kind of nervous to include a strategic alignment stage here, because I thought, everybody that's building a product is already aligned, they have the backing of their company, etc. Well, it turns out that this is probably one of the biggest pitfalls. Most companies that I talk to, because it's in B2B, it's in mid to big organizations, they when you start talking to the stakeholders, they don't have alignment on what customer problem they're going to solve. They usually just want to say, hey, we just want more revenue, we want more cost cuts, or we're going to solve something with AI, but there's really no clarity. And so for a product team, for an innovation team to actually deliver something that can survive the first 10 customers, you need to have alignment, because the executive team needs to support the innovation team throughout these 6 stages. And by support means as you find validation in the market that you're gaining traction, you're going to need more people, more money, developers, etc. And so the company has to be aligned and saying, yes, we are willing to explore this path. And the key here is also to say it's explore. You're not guaranteeing that that alignment statement that you agreed on is going to deliver a product. You're exploring, right? So you have to agree on the problem to explore and agree on the approach. And the approach is going to be iteratively testing and validating your assumptions as you go forward. So I see that most companies struggle in that point.
Got it. I mean, on the part of strategic alignment, do you think the bigger issue is the manner in which product people are trying to communicate the strategy, or the ability of the executive team to understand it?
I think both. I think that product people, technology people, and business people, they just speak different languages. And usually I've seen a lot of product people just come in with like a process-based thing, and this is the process we're going to follow. But leaders don't really care about that. They care about the return on investment. And so it's about aligning on, this is a problem that we're going to solve for our customers in terms of a business perspective, and this is how we're going to approach it, and this is what's going to cost us. So product managers need to talk the language of business, not technology, not product, not process, right? So I think that's a big opportunity for us to step up and be more concrete and get our voices heard better.
Yeah, and Pablo has a question in the chat. Pablo, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
We got questions in the chat. Cool.
Yeah, thank you, Ibrahim. It's like researching from the importance of problems and the underserved ones. I mean, this matrix, I think, is important in order to find relevant problems that are developed with some success probability, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think you have to figure out that, and I think it's I would add another dimension to your metrics, Pablo, which is what the company can realistically embark on. Because sometimes, the company is not suited up. Like I deal with a lot of connected devices like IoT. You have software companies that all of a sudden say they want to do hardware or vice versa, or they want to add a service and they are a product company or vice versa. So it has to be something that falls within the capabilities of the company. So thank you. Gracias, Pablo, from Uruguay.
Thank you very much. Gracias a ti.
I'm from Mexico City, so saludos.
Saludos.
So going back to your 6 steps, Daniel, where do you think product teams struggle the most?
That's a great question. I honestly think the product teams struggle throughout the journey. And let me tell you what I mean. When I was, many years in product, and also when I was figuring out how to write this book, one of the things that I learned is that in product, we have so many disjointed tools and techniques. But it's very difficult, even for the product team or for the leadership team, to understand how all this fits together to go from idea to some potential revenue. And so I see a lot of teams focusing on, it's all about interviewing users, or it's all about doing mock-ups, or it's all about analyzing the market. But what is the sequence that you should do those, and why, and how do you actually do those techniques, and how do those techniques reduce the risk of the next step and the next step and the next step? So can product teams not only execute on those steps, but can they articulate what is the actual journey that they're going to take their company through as they go from idea to early customers? And is the culture and the willingness of the leadership team to allow for that cadence of steps to occur, right? And so I think product teams struggle in all these steps, not only on the specific tactics on how to execute the steps, but on how to stitch them together and how to communicate the value and how to communicate the support that they need as they go from one stage to the next. Because what I've seen from my perspective, driving innovation is half outside looking, right? Half the market. And the other half is driving your company along throughout the journey, because many product teams lose that perspective and they believe that, leadership should just fall in line. You are convincing them and bringing them along. And if you don't do that, doesn't matter anything else, you're going to lose support and the product's going to die.
Yeah, I want to go back to your point about consumer versus B2B products. There is a trend where, even knowledge workers using B2B software have consumer-like expectations, right? In terms of setup, onboarding, ease of use, aesthetic. And so to your point about, hey, the user is not the buyer, is that changing? Like if your product is sold through a PLG motion or a self-serve channel, isn't it essentially like a consumer product or no?
Not really. I mean, 15 years ago, before the PLG craze, I was working at a UX agency, and our goal was to deliver what we called Sunday experiences on Monday, right? You have your PlayStation and your Netflix, and why can't I have those experiences in my enterprise software? So it's nothing necessarily new. I think the big difference is twofold, right? PLG only works when the product, it's a simple product, right? And I cannot talk too much about those motions because my focus has been on more complex industrial types of solutions. And so, for example, when you are selling to a company, there has the types of solutions that I work with, they need to be adopted at the department or at the enterprise level. And so individual users might try and might be advocates, but they really are not going to have the final say. You still have to have this committee sale, and it gets pushed from above. Also, a lot of the B2B applications in enterprise that I deal with are usually critical infrastructure. And so a lot of the, for example, PLG motions that I see, like freemium and then upgrade, I usually joked, and I was in a podcast the other day, and I was joking that imagine that you're a power plant operator and there's going to be a blackout and you need to dispatch energy storage to the grid, and your software comes up with a pop-up and says, would you like to upgrade to our premium analytics for $5? No, I mean, this is critical infrastructure. This is very different, right? So I think one of the challenges that I see with our profession specifically, right? A lot of the perspective is B2C. And then there are some topics that just are presented as holy grails like PLG, right? PLG serves a space. It's interesting for a specific area, but there are many other areas that it's not really that useful. And so if you are in healthcare, in automotive, in energy, in military, water conservation, those kind of things, the motions are different, right? Still sales-led, it's enterprise sales, it's adoption at the high level and then rolls down. So I think the point I want to make is, as an innovator, you have to understand the context of your company and your industry before you try to push some motions that you read from the latest book, mine included, right? Which I don't like to say that, but yeah, mine included.
I was going to ask you, you mentioned earlier like that 10 customer threshold is an interesting one. What do you think are the right success metrics for new product innovation in B2B? And one that I hear thrown out a lot is like get to the first million in ARR, get to the first 10 million. So A, what do you think are the right metrics? And B, what do you think about revenue as a metric?
Yeah, that's a really good one. I think that those metrics are very either B2C or what I call light B2B. I think it's very difficult to get to like 1 million recurring revenue off the bat in innovation. And I played a lot with metrics, and that's why I landed on 10 successful customers, right? And in the book, I define what successful means. But the reason is because when you're dealing with this enterprise type of solutions, there is a lot to delivering the solution, like creating this, let's say, software hardware, but also deploying it, onboarding people, making sure that you can maintain the solution and that the solution is delivering the value that you are being paid for. And it takes several deployments before you actually start having certainty that you're solving the right problem and that you can make it profitable. So that's why at this point, revenue goals is too early. Other metrics are too early, right? Let's get to 10 customers that you can deliver. And by 10, you would have seen everything that's going to go wrong, and you can make decisions about next steps. Next step metrics might be some revenue metrics, etc., right? But initially, if you think about the types of solutions that I'm talking about, these are $100,000, multi-million-dollar installations for each customer, right? And so it's a very different ballgame.
I guess let me ask you this. We have a lot of people on the call who I know are working on new product initiatives at companies that have established B2B products. So they're working on add-ons and new products.
Right.
And everything you said makes sense. But their CEO is telling them, I want that $10 million run rate before I invest more in this business. So how do you recommend people navigate talking to CEOs who are focused on incremental ARR as a measure of success?
Yeah, I think by the time you're having that conversation, I think you already lost, right? Because it's not the right discussion to be having, right? It's really difficult at that point of innovation to create something from scratch and just say, our next metric is this 10 million recurring revenue. In fact, and again, I'm going back to the examples of the industries that I serve. That's why it might not be applicable. But like some of the industries that I serve, they don't even like recurring revenue, right? They won't even do that, right? So again, the metric has to be in context of the industry and the types of customers that you're serving. And so I think it's having those conversations with your leadership about how are we going to measure it, and then why some things work and some things don't, right? It's all contextual. But having that discussion now, if your CEO is saying we need this tomorrow, I mean, you're going to do it, but it's not likely that it's going to succeed, right? I would just dig deeper into understand where is that coming from, how can you alleviate that, are there other ways you can think about this problem, right?
Yeah. And speaking of revenue, when in your six-step journey is the right time to think about commercialization and pricing and packaging?
Yeah, good question. So remember the method in my book, or it's about getting to 10 early adopters, so 10 customers. When you are going from prototyping stage to the early adopter stage and you're starting to deploy your first solutions, you are going to start testing how are you going to package your solution and how are you going to price your solution so that these early adopters can buy it. But you are, at this point, you're testing what's going to work. And like I said, when you deploy the solutions, you're going to figure out your margins. Maybe installation was a lot harder, maybe deployment, maybe maintenance was a lot harder, etc. So you start figuring out, oh, we should have charged more, our margins are not what we should, etc. That's why these 6 stages are for testing all these things. And then once you have your first 10 successful customers and you start gearing up for the next stage of maybe potential growth, like the next 100, this is when you start having those discussions. It's like, okay, we learned that the way we packaged it was not correct. These 5 customers didn't like it. We need to charge more. Is that going to put us off market, etc.? But I think it's like until you have some certainty that you can deliver that value. Now, throughout the market discovery and user discovery stages, you are testing and probing for that willingness to pay and getting an idea of the size of the problem you're solving so that you can get an idea of how much you can charge.
Got it. I just want to pause for a second. Any questions from the audience? I know we're moving pretty fast.
I see some familiar faces in the audience.
Yeah. Well, feel free to unmute yourself or chime in on the chat. So I'll keep going. One thing that I've been curious about is, especially at an established product company, you can introduce new products for revenue expansion, but you sometimes introduce new products as a retention play or a margin improvement play, as in products you might almost just give away because it makes customers stickier, or products that allow you to serve customers more cost effectively. And do you think about B2B product innovation differently if the goal is revenue generation versus retention or margins?
No, that's a great question. No, I don't think anything different, because I think the only thing that changes it is at that strategic alignment stage is to decide or agree what is the goal of this product. Is it a opening new market? Is it reducing cost? Is it defending our moat? What is it, right? And then as you go through the different stages, you always have that in mind so that you can arrive at something that delivers that outcome for your customer and for your company. Because even if you're saying we want just something to improve margins and so it's just another module, that you still have to understand the pain of the customer that's going to want that, how users are going to use it, the pain and the size of the pain. You have to still design a solution. You have to still prototype it to make sure that it's the right one. You still have to deploy your first 10 customers. So nothing really changes. It's just that everything is geared towards the internal outcome of, let's say, cost cutting or expanding to a new market or whatever you decide, right? But the process is the same.
I'm curious, in an at-scale company that might have multiple B2B products in its portfolio, if you didn't go through these steps correctly, and now you're in a situation where you have sort of a Frankenstein product with very few or almost no customers, how do you unwind that? Because my old boss used to say the only thing worse than no customers is one customer. And so what do you do if you're in that situation where you never got to 10, you never scaled it, but there's some pressure to not end of life it?
Yeah, so I've been in that situation many times. And I think it's, first of all, is realizing that you're in that situation. And if you are in that situation, chances are that you skipped some of the stages, right? And so you can go back and just have a quick meeting with your team and say, okay, what did we skip? Is there no market for this? In fact, in the book, I opened the book by talking about this product that I led earlier in my career, where we sold one, right? And so now in hindsight, I can go back and I said, well, we didn't do this, we didn't do this, we didn't do this. That's why we're in this situation. And so can we go back and address some market discovery to see if there is more willingness to pay? And if there's not, then we can decide, right? And so I think it's about understanding what you missed and then figure out if that can be fixed. I can tell you an example that is in my latest course, the Mastering B2B Product Innovation. There's an example there where I was brought in to analyze a product that was not moving, was not selling, and so we needed to do something. And after going back to these steps, and it's like, okay, what did we miss? Did we have alignment on what we wanted? Yes. Is there a market for this product? No. Okay, then my recommendation to the executive team was, let's kill it, right? Because we're going to spend more money trying to fix it than doing something else that customers really want. So that's why this mental frameworks help you figure out, like, what are the stepping stones? What did you miss? And what can you do? And make a decision that is informed.
I am curious to your point about, is there a market for it? Sometimes you get different opinions about that. So I'm just in B2B, and I've been in the situation multiple times. You're going to have the product point of view, the CEO's point of view, the sales leader's point of view, the analyst who cover the space point of view, not to mention other random players, right? So if there is dispute about is there or isn't there a market, how do you actually go about sizing it and scoping it? Because a lot of times I've seen that thrown at product marketing to go figure out, finance to go figure out, and it kind of feels like an MBA exercise with some real stakes to it.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, I mean, there's a whole series of chapters of that in the book and in my course, because I think that's really important. And what I mean by market, I rarely think of it as like in Shark Tank, right? It's like there's a $3 billion market, right? First of all, you have to define in a very concrete way, what is your target market? And in the book, I have 5 criteria on how do you size your market? Like, how do you define what a market is? And that includes the industry, the company size, the use case, their geography, and who has the pain. So once you have those elements and you have something very concrete, right? It's like hotels of companies that have hotel portfolios between 1 billion and 5 billion that are looking to reduce their energy cost, and the director of operations is having this problem in North America. Okay, well, how many of those are there? And then the key here is, can you go and talk to 10, 12 of those companies and validate whether they have this pain, right? Because ultimately, it's not about the numbers in the spreadsheet. I've received from my teams spreadsheets that say this was an amazing opportunity, but when you actually talk to the people, that's not a real pain. And so I think our role for product leaders is to take that data and make it real by going and talking to those companies. But first, we need to identify who those companies are with clear criteria and say, you know what, this group of people that we thought that there are plenty for us to go after have this problem. Okay, then it's worth for us to continue moving to the next stage of the journey, which is user discovery.
What advice would you have to prevent yourself from falling into the trap of asking leading questions and hearing what you want to hear?
Oof. Yeah, it's I think it's just more like self-awareness, right? Really, in going and understanding the market and doing these kind of things, usually it is a teamwork. So go with somebody else, analyze the answers together. Just make sure that you're just being aware of those things, because it happens all the time, right? We latch into what we want to hear. Some of the teams that I work with, like the moment the customer mentions even remotely that pain, they go into sales mode about selling them what they have in their mind, right? It's like, that's why the user discovery has to be done by somebody that has the skills to do user discovery and try to be as unbiased as possible. So either your product team is trained on that, or you have user researchers on staff, or you hire an agency that can help you with that, right? So those are tools that can help. And I laid all those down in the book.
Got it. I wanted to ask, we're talking a lot about new product introduction in an existing company, right? But there is the more common example of just establishing a new company in the B2B space. Do you tackle the journey in different ways in those two situations?
No, not at a higher level. I do, like I said in my new course, I do make that distinction a little bit stronger. And to be honest, the only distinction is politics. Because when you're working at an established company that has other products, you're dealing with established sales team that you might be afraid of cannibalizing what you're building already. You have a lot of nuances that you have to navigate. And when you're at a startup, that's all they do. It's a lot easier to focus, but at the same time, it's a lot easier to just go with the hunch of the founder, because that's the reason for the startup to exist, right? So I don't adjust it other than the politics. And I think the one caveat or the one warning that I would give is, in big companies, there's a tendency to take whatever the innovation team is doing and just push it through their channels because they have that advantage. But the problem is that those channels are full of pragmatists. People that expect full solutions are not necessarily early adopters. And so your new product is going to fail miserably. So even if you are an established company, you need to find the early adopters in your customers so that they are willing to test an untested solution and take it from there. But the process should be very similar.
I want to double click on that because, I've worked in B2B products for a number of years and I've advised a number of founders and CPOs. One thing that gets thrown out all the time is they're like, the Microsoft strategy. We're going to build, pardon my French, a shitty version of this product, and we're just going to put it in our distribution channel and then we'll evolve it over time. Everybody thinks they can do the Microsoft strategy. They're going to build the 20% of the feature set and, they're just going to utilize their channel. Any thoughts on that? Like, does that only work for Microsoft?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of risk and using strategies from ultra successful companies. The reality is, the question I would ask is, are those 20 features, 20% of the product that you plan to build offer value for your customer? Does that solve the problem and your customer would be willing to pay for, right? Because that's the key. It doesn't matter if you have the muscle to push it through and fix it later. If the initial thing doesn't fix any problems, it's not going to go anywhere, right? So it's more important to make sure that you have something that solves a problem and then figure out how you're going to scale it. once you get to that early adopter stage, you work with 10 customers, then you can figure out what's your go-to market for real, and then you can partner with bigger companies and use their channels, etc. But initially, it's a little bit risky, and of course, it's very appealing, right? It's like you have this channel, or like you have a partnership with a large organization, and you're a startup, and they can put you in front of their customers. Great, but you have to make sure that their customers are understanding that you're delivering a new solution, is not complete, is not tested, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So just a lot of caveats to think about.
By the way, Niels makes a good point, which is that really Microsoft's strategy? I'm not saying that's Microsoft's strategy. I'm saying that's how a lot of people interpret Microsoft's roadmap. Liz actually asked a great question. When different leaders have different opinions about the market, whose quote unquote job is it to get everyone on the same page?
That's a great question. It's hard to say from a whose job is it. I see product leadership as the role that is kind of like the unifier and trying to get everybody aligned so that you can push the product forward. So I would take it on myself as a product leader to say, okay, let's try to reconcile these different market views and make sure that everybody's aligned moving forward. So that doesn't mean that you yourself are going to do the job. You might bring in somebody from marketing or some analyst or you ask for budget to hire an analyst firm. But in this case, it might be useful for the product leader to take up on that and solve it and bring a potential solution to the table. It also gives you a lot of building of trust with leadership, right? When you take on those big challenges and trying to find the middle ground.
No, great answer, Daniel. I was going to ask, you mentioned earlier, getting to those 10 customers. It does happen that you can get 10 customers, not because you're solving a repeatable pain, but just because you have a good sales team or a good distribution channel, or, customers trust you from previous history.
Right.
How do you navigate sort of a real set of 10 customers versus a fake set of 10 customers?
Yeah, that's a great question. The first thing that I look for is each of those 10 customers, do they fall under my ideal customer profile or that I mentioned before, right? They're from the right industry, right company size. They have, we're solving the same exact use case for them. They're the same geography, right? So if they are all the same, that's one thing, because otherwise you have, one customer from automotive and one from energy and one from healthcare. It's really difficult, right? So, and then the second thing that I would do is, as you're working with those 10 customers, have they all articulated the same pain? And are you demonstrating that your solution is solving that pain? Because that's all really that you're looking for, right? If no, then you might need to review whether you need 10 more or 5 more, or go back on the journey and figure out, do we need to readjust our market, our target market, or our solution, etc. The point here is really at the early adopter stage, you're trying to make sure that you can deliver value to those customers by solving their problem. So by working with them, you will realize that we're not even solving the same problem, or they're not really, and so that comes on from working in the field.
Yeah, it's interesting the way you're framing this. It puts the product person not only sort of accountable for the strategy, but almost laying the track for what will eventually become deal qualification, pipeline building, sourcing strategy. And it leads to this term that, goes in and out of vogue in the industry, which is PM as GM. What do you think about that? Because on the one hand, I think it's a lot of accountability and scope for a product leader. On the other hand, you do tend to get pushback saying, hey, somebody else owns the actual execution of this channel building or pipeline building.
Yep. Yeah. So I'll answer it in 2 parts. The first part is, throughout this process that I'm laying out, one of the key elements is to build what I call your advisory board. It's basically a group of people, a group of executives from multiple departments that have a vested interest in this initiative working. And you're going to be carrying them throughout the journey. And so that should include people from the go-to-market side, because they need to be involved in what you're building, because they are the ones that are going to have to sell it, right? So in that sense, the PM is not necessarily in the track for the go-to-market, is that you're involving the people that are going to be responsible for that, and they need to agree that they will be able to take to market what you're building. So it's more of a partnership. Now, to your specific question, what do I think about this PM as GM? I don't particularly like it because I think in our profession, we are a little bit narcissistic. Like, we like to put a lot of responsibility and might on the product manager. And there's this thing about like, you're the CEO of the product. And those, I think, are toxic views of things. The PM as a GM, that would mean that you have budget approval, people approval. You have all these things that are a GM. So either you're a GM or you're a PM. There's no in between. What I do think is that PMs make for good GMs, but a GM is a specific role. I've been in active GM roles and it's very different, right? So I don't want to confound things. PM, we have our role, we have our area of influence, and we're a part of the delivery team, but we're not a GM or we're not a CEO of the product, or so some of the best GMs I know have come from product, but that's where I draw the line.
So Daniel, whenever I do the recaps of these sessions, I do a write-up and I create some video snippets. I can 100% tell you what you just said is going to end up as a snippet, because the number of people who have created drama and trauma for PMs by trying to jam them into GM roles where they have no actual authority to change the campaigns you're running or the marketing spend or anything like that is kind of comical to me. So I'm very glad you clarified that.
Thank you.
I want to talk a little bit about trends you're seeing in the B2B space. Like, what do you think are the headwinds and the tailwinds that B2B product innovators should be aware of?
Yeah, I think that's a good one. And, one of the things that I'm seeing, and I hate I'm going to say this, but AI, right? We see it everywhere. And I see it pros and cons. I was working on AI solutions, 15, 18 years ago, right? So it's not necessarily something super new, but now it's extremely hyped. And so I think that's a negative, right? It's very hyped. So I see a lot of teams jumping on AI just because they don't want to be left behind, but they miss the point of innovation, which is solving a real problem. And so instead of focusing on the problem to solve, they are focusing on how could we use AI for something, right? So I think that's a big problem. On the other hand, AI does have a big impact on what you can do if you take a step back and can you solve a problem in a better way than you used to before? And you can do that at the enterprise level. I see it in industrial applications on the manipulation of data, the recognition of patterns for predictive maintenance, etc., or for business applications embedded in, but you don't really know that you're using AI, right? So I think the challenge is finding this balance between not being carried away by the hype and making sure that you're leveraging this new tool that you have to deliver new value to your customer.
Can I just double click on that? So I 100% agree with what you're saying, which is you don't want to be like AI is the end all be all, because that becomes the tail wagging the dog, right? But I have noticed this trend where a lot of buyers are like, I don't have any budget, but if you got any AI, I have AI budget. It's very tempting as an innovator to be like, well, I got to capitalize on that AI budget, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I think B2B is particularly interesting, because at the end of the day, as part of the product team, you need to help your company increase revenue and grow. Otherwise, there's no business to be had. So, sometimes, that's why sales has so much sway in the B2B roadmap, because they have this one customer that is going to be 30% of your quarterly revenue, and they want this one specific thing. It's kind of hard to say no. And so you have to have that flexibility. And maybe you work with your sales team to do some sales enablement and how to tackle that. Maybe you do some mock-up features or some like low risk features that have AI just so that you can say you have it because it's good for your business, right? You just have to be smart about it. Just don't drink the Kool-Aid that you need to have it and it's the end all be all, right? Just be a smart business person. and make sure that you're supporting what the company needs.
I guess other than AI, any interesting trends you're seeing?
Yeah, I am very passionate about the climate tech industry. So that is, the technology that you can use to address the climate crisis. And we're seeing a lot of the adoption of the latest technology in that space. So edge, cloud, AI, IoT applications, mobile. And so we're seeing a really nice juncture between traditional companies that have been doing business forever in a more traditional way and how they're incorporating all this new technology to provide the solutions that are critical for our society. So I can talk for hours about that topic, but I'm seeing this technology being used for solutions that are super, super impactful, like life and death impactful. And so that's exciting in B2B because now B2B is getting that momentum and is leveraging these solutions to provide value to society.
Well, we don't have hours, but maybe you could spend a minute more. I know a lot of people on this call and a lot of my async viewers and readers are interested in working on climate tech products, but may not have that domain experience. What advice would you give them on sort of breaking into that space as a PM?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I actually have a post. I wrote a post about it this week, so maybe you can put it in the show notes. I think the first thing to understand is that climate tech is tech first. And so companies working on these problems are technology companies that have developers and designers and PMs, and it's just a company, right? It's just the industry that you're focusing on. And I think there's a couple of books. There's the one's called How to Avoid a Climate Disaster by Bill Gates that talks about all the different solutions that you need in order to address climate change. And so decarbonizing of the grid, how we generate renewable energy, how we power our transport with electricity, all those things. And if you double click on that, there are companies, tech companies underneath all those umbrella industries, and they all need product managers, and just a matter of kind of understanding the landscape and then double clicking on the companies that are doing the work. In fact, in a few weeks, I'll be launching a podcast series where I'll be interviewing product leaders working on the energy transition. So talk about how do you bring climate tech solutions to market, specifically for product people. And so because I'm passionate about that, and you don't get a lot of attention on those topics. So that's something that I can share the link as well. But basically, it's understanding the problems, understand the solutions, and the type of companies. Your skills translate 100% to what climate tech companies need today.
Gotcha. I will ask, going back to your 6-step journey, which of those steps do you think are fundamentally getting easier and harder because of changes in tools and technology?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I have a diagram here in front of me. I think user discovery is getting easier because it used to be when I started doing user discovery years ago, it was hard to schedule a meeting with somebody. And then you have to bring somebody to take notes while you talk to this customer. And then you have to analyze all the data and correlate it. Now you can just do a call via Zoom, record it, the transcription, put it to ChatGPT, and it kind of tells you a lot of the insights. And then you can feed a lot of those to ChatGPT, and it gives you insights across your universe of interviewees. So that's super, super powerful. And there's tools like Craftful and others that are specifically for product people. So that's one. The other one I think is prototyping, because now you have a lot of tools to simulate what your solution could be from software and hardware perspective. So you don't have to spend a lot of money actually building something to verify whether it is solving the right problem. So I think those two are going to be a great advantage.
Great. Yeah, and I agree with you. For me, when I start adopting some of those tools, they've gone mainstream, and I have started to use some of those tools. I want to sort of turn it back to the audience. We have about 5 minutes left with Danielle. Any questions that folks want answered around B2B product innovation, climate tech, anything else, Danielle? Feel free to put them in the chat or unmute yourself. And, while folks are gathering the courage to ask questions, Danielle, I'll ask, what are the best ways for people to get a hold of you, to learn further from you, to follow up with you?
Great. Thank you for that. Yeah, the best way is just to go to my website. So it's my name, danielelizalde.com. And I have my blog there, my podcast. Well, I'll have this climate tech series as well. I have access to links to my courses. I have a course on IoT and a course on B2B innovation. There's links to my book. So everything is there, and you can contact me there, or feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well.
Well, and then I'm posting links to all the things Daniel just said, the website, the blog with the climate tech post, the book, and then of course his upcoming course as well. And then Khattab, it sounds like you have a question. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Sure. Thank you for the insights. I was looking for some guidance on starting a company leading with a high price managed sales cycle where you're getting to that road of 10 or road of 20 first customers. That takes a lot of hand holding, gathering lots of insights, but at the end, you're going to generate some meaningful revenue out of each of those. At what point, be it the number of those customers or a revenue target, do you start really prioritizing the self-serve funnel in your product roadmap?
That's a good question. Thank you for that. I don't, because self-serve it's more of a growth motion, and it depends on the industry and depends on the client. And so once you get to the early adopter stage, you have proven that that you can serve and provide value to 10 customers. You can decide your next steps, right? Your next 10 customers, your next 100 customers, and you can start making all decisions based on what you have learned. Was there a lot of friction on the installation part? Was there a lot of friction on the onboarding? And so those questions will inform what type of functionality you're going to put in your roadmap. And maybe self-serve is going to be an answer to some of those questions, because self-serve in itself, it's a solution. You need to understand what problem are you solving. Of course, when you're trying to go to scale, self-serve becomes useful for your own company to be able to scale without scaling the number of people. But again, you have to understand what problem they're solving. And maybe it's too early for self-serve. Maybe you don't need it. Maybe you need it in some areas and not others. So it's all an exploration, but that comes much later, I think.
Cool. Any other questions for Daniel?
Hi, this is Liz. Daniel, just to follow up to what you just said, is that the similar mindset for companies that maybe are starting off with a B2B service and then are thinking about offering a product? Is it more of a growth decision?
Yeah, it could be. I think that's a good point. I mean, I think that launching products, you have to have a clarity on what the role of that product is going to be. And then you can follow this innovation process that I am laying out here to meet that need. And so, for example, that I work with companies, that advise companies where they're launching a product and the product is just going to be a door opener for their services. And that's fine. And so therefore, that product is designed specifically to do that. I work with other companies where the product is the beginning of their transition to become a product company as opposed to a services company, and so on, right? So it all depends on the ultimate goal, but I would say the methodology of determining whether that product, like how to approach that product, is going to be the same. Does that make sense, Liz? Does that resonate?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. And Liz, if you want to ping me on LinkedIn or email later, I'll send you something I've read that's really good about how to jump from a services business to a product business. But I think we're coming up on time, and I want to be respectful of Daniel. I know he has a back-to-back meeting. So thank you for all of us for joining. Thank you, Daniel, for attending and sharing your amazing insights around your book, your course, your experience in IoT and climate tech. Really interesting discussion. And, we'll be back in a couple of weeks with other interesting leaders like Daniel, and you can continue to check out my Run the Business Substack newsletter for recaps and posts and upcoming events as well.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me. And I just put a link to one of my podcast episodes of transitioning from services to products. So hopefully that sparked the discussion. And yeah, reach out. Happy to connect. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your Friday.